Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Home Rockstar Podcast. Today for today's episode, we are talking to the founder and CEO of the Sukha Company. And what he does, I love this line, he makes a focus app for people who work from home, which is great. And he helps them to go from at 6 p.m., they say, where did the day go? To at 3 p.m., let's play with the kids. So I'm excited to hear more about this. But first, Steven Puri, hey, are you ready to rock?
Are you ready to rock?
I am definitely ready to rock. What a
Let's
great
do it.
microphone you have.
Let's make it happen.
Awesome. So we always start off on a good note. Tell me a story
Mhm.
of success that we could be inspired by.
You know what? You reminded me with that very fun introduction. I will tell you a success story that involves not only my wife, but also one of the people I serve. And when I started back in tech, because I'd been in film, I got back into tech. The companies I was running were all remote. And I loved, I could hire people from anywhere, a global talent pool. You didn't have to live driving to the office, no wasted time commuting, all the things people talk about. I was like, that's great, but there are some challenges because my wife and I are both working from home, right? So in the course of developing what it is we were developing, uh, you know, my wife and I got married like a couple years ago, and we were on our honeymoon in Bali, right? Beautiful, idyllic place. And when you run small companies, you're accustomed to, I think when you run any company, you're accustomed to people asking you questions all day long.
Yep.
So for this one stretch of like 10 days, no one bugged me. Everyone's like, stay away from Fury. He's on his honeymoon. Just let him have his moment, right? So I was talking to Laura and I was like, I know this sounds crazy, but when we come back, I really want to figure out like, what do we call this? Like, I want to brand this in a certain way. And I was thinking maybe the best people to guide me about what it is we do are these early users, the members who are here already that, pay us. So do you mind if I have a couple quick zooms with them just to feed my unconscious mind of like the things they would say because they're outside the bubble and I'm inside the bubble, like building and working on it. So she, of course, love her. She's like, yeah, talk to the people. There was one of our members I spoke to who's still a member years later, and he said that to me. I was like, what's your favorite feature? Why do you like using it? He gave me a bunch of answers to that. And he finally said, this is, I think, what you're asking. He's like, why do I pay you? And I was like, yeah, why do you pay us? And he said, because at 3 o'clock, I could be playing with my kids, or at 6 o'clock, I can be like, where the hell did the day go? And the
Yeah.
difference is, did I open your app in the morning? So I was like, man, that was so way better than any question I was asking. Thank you for guiding me to like the gold. So that night, we had dinner and Laura and I were talking, we're hanging out in bed. And I was like, this guy said this thing to me. It's just ringing in my head all day. And I think it was the greatest thing I've heard about what we do. And Laura, we met in yoga. Laura and I have a daily yoga practice. There are a lot of Sanskrit words that are in our, and concepts are kind of in our minds and our spirit. And she's like, that's Sukha. Like, I think what it is you're talking about is you're not like Focus App 14, you're not Remote Focus 12, you're not that. It's actually the productivity is the path to happiness, to self-fulfillment. And that's what this guy's telling you is like, I want to get to the place at 3 o'clock where I'm like, hey, let me go throw a ball with my kid in the yard, not at 6 o'clock being like, I missed that time with my family. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, I think that's what it is. And that's why I called it the Sukha Company, which basically means the happiness company, because that's what we want to do. And the path may be helping you work smarter and better, but ultimately it's just like, I'm happier in my life. And that
Wow.
was probably the biggest success of everything I was doing is going, you're right. That's what I want to do with my life.
Wow. Wow. Well, and I think that people who decide that they want to work from home, I think that that's
Mhm.
probably the majority of people what they want. They want that flexibility. It's not necessarily that they want to work for themselves, it's that they want to be able to, you know, spend a afternoon with their kids if they want to spend an afternoon with the kids, right?
Yes, I think it's a lot about that redefinition of like work is what you do, it's not where you do it. That
Hmm.
was a really important distinction for me. And the other part of that is work is really about goals. It's not about hours that you put in. It's that culture that, and I worked in SF, I worked in LA. Like there's definitely I mean, I'm grinding it out. I'm so proud. I worked 14, 18 hours. So that's sort of like badge
Yeah.
of honor. And
Yeah.
it's like shifting that into, I don't actually care how many hours you work. What I care is like, did we meet what we wanted to meet? Our team, did it win?
Yeah.
And if you can do that in 2 hours or 6 hours, do it in 2 hours and then just be happier and healthier.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And And you also like you say you have sort of these goals of things you want to meet. And I think that I remember when I was in a cubicle, I was so far away from that
I'm
end
sorry.
product. Well, I was just so far away from that end product that like the part that I was doing, I even had a hard time conceptualizing of what it did. Like what am I doing here? I'm just going and I'm just doing this thing that they told me to do, and I don't really see how that's helping the world, you know? And
Yep.
I think that when you're starting your own business or when you're doing your own thing, you know how you're helping your client. You've got
Yeah.
this connection to them, and you're like, okay, I feel like I have more of a purpose here, right?
A lot of people ask me, why did you leave film? And I'll tell you, it really came down to Die Hard 5. And it was very similar to what you said, where when Fox recruited me to come from DreamWorks, they were very aggressive and generous with money, projects. They're like, you'll run the Die Hard franchise, the Wolverine franchise, the Independence Day franchise, like all this stuff, right? Which are pretty appealing. And you're like, oh man, I'll be a senior executive, like 30 jobs like that in the world. I have
Mm.
one of them and I'll be well paid for it, right? So a couple of years in, I remember having this day where we were on Die Hard 5. And like you said, I was like, there is a complete disconnect between what I am doing and anything good happening in the world. Like, these are not related. And I was like, I don't want to wake up, be like 40, 50 years old, to tell my kids, okay, daddy's going off to make Die Hard 11 today.
Wow.
So that's when I got back into tech to actually build stuff. And, I had two failures when I got back into tech. I had two companies raise millions of dollars. They ultimately didn't work out. But man, was I happier just saying, like, I can actually solve things and hopefully help people, as opposed to what should Bruce say in this movie?
Yep. Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, you mentioned the failures. So I think a lot of people don't take that step because they're just afraid that it's not going to work out for them, right? Or they're
Yeah,
going to
true.
make a mistake.
Yep.
And I try to talk about this because everybody I've had on the podcast has something to say about this, about that bad note, right? And like, what would your story be? Like, what was the bad note of your journey?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm going to give you a bad note and a grace note, if you will, to extend the music metaphor. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So definitely that moment I was having at Fox was the one that was so bad that I was like, wow, I made a series of decisions that got me here, but I feel like I'm trading my life for meaningless stuff. So I'm making money and I have a job a lot of people like envy. And it's true, when you're a senior executive at a studio, you can kind of call anybody and they'll pick up the phone. You call anyone in government and they're like, oh my God, it's a vice president at Fox. Maybe they want to make a movie about me. So it was crazy the access you had, but it was also kind of meaningless in a way. Or like, I have a friend who's still working on like the Ant-Man series. We've been friends for 20 plus years. And he's like, hey man, my kids need to pay for private school. Like, don't judge. I'm making Ant-Man 9 or whatever it is. It's like, okay, it's a thing. So what I thought was interesting was there was that moment, which was a bad note of like, if it had not been so bad, I wouldn't have left film to get back into tech, right? But here's actually the deeper bad note, which is a flaw in myself that I had to come to terms with, which is my first two companies. Because I had one successful company when I was like 28. We sold it, that computer graphics company, right? So I thought, oh, this is easy. So when I went from film back into tech, I didn't listen enough to my members, to my users. I had that feeling of like, well, I know what this thing should be like. Let me just create it.
Right.
And man, it was like being tone deaf. You're like, actually, that's not A. You're not tuning to 440. Like you're tuning to your own frequency, and it's not 440, bud.
Mhm.
And those companies didn't work. And that was a lesson going into this one, where like the story I told you about our honeymoon, where I was like, I just crave talking to members and being like, how am I doing? You know?
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm getting
Yeah.
better at it. But man, did I suck at that for a while.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that's the thing. We feel like we're the expert, and we know what we're doing, but
Yeah.
you know, I think that if you're in a company, I mean, companies spend so much money on market research to figure out what
Mhm.
the client wants, right? And then we jump out on our own and go, I think I know better. But
Yeah. And our culture celebrates those success stories. This decacorn came from this thing. Da, da. And let's be super honest. Like, good example. Before Airbnb and Uber, people had tried similar ideas. But that idea of like, hey, you want to have a stranger sleep on your sofa for a couple bucks? Hey, you want to drive around someone else like you're a taxi driver? Da, da. They hit that moment in the recession when those two companies tried the idea. People were like, actually, how much? Like $40? Yeah, sure, $40. Sleep on my sofa tonight. So those tailwinds carried those ideas forward. Whereas, if you launched them 2 years earlier, those ideas failed. And 2 years later, those ideas failed. So there's also that thing of like, you can think you're as smart as you want to be, but if you're not selling water in the summer, there's a reason lemonade sells in the summertime.
Yeah, sometimes you might have the right idea, just the wrong time, right?
There are a lot of factors. You can work as hard as you want, be as smart as you want, and there's also an element of like luck.
Well, and now, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that though. So, like you say, I mean, there are situations where your idea is really good, but no one's getting it yet.
Yep.
What do you like? Is there sort of like a formula, or is there how do you know when to give up?
Well, let me give you an example because I spent a bunch of time in film, and there's actually a very clear answer from film, which is I got to work from the bottom up. I started as an assistant, literally the you and like, hey, you get me coffee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I treated it like an apprenticeship. I worked a year for a manager, a year for the president of Paramount as his first assistant, because I wanted to see both sides, like the sell side, I'm trying to sell my clients, and the buy side, will I buy your clients, right? That was fascinating to me. So I started there, ended up obviously as a senior executive, studios and all that. I went into it thinking, oh my God, I read the script. It's so good. This guy is so talented. Or I saw this short film. This guy is so talented. This girl is so talented, whatever. They're going to be successful. And I'll tell you this, after 10, 15 years in film, the determining factor that I saw about who is still working in it was not the amount of talent that I gauged subjectively they had. It was how tenacious they were. Mm-hmm. And that definitely informed me in my life. And I hope, like right now, Laura's pregnant. We're going to have our son this fall. And
congratulations.
Is something I hope, thank you. I'm super excited about it. And I hope that is something that I can, in the most gentle, sort of subtle way, imbue in our household, the sense of like, if you really believe in something, keep at it. Don't just have your first disappointment and be like, oh, well, I'm not meant to be a guitarist. I'm not meant to be a writer. It's like, no, man, they spend a lot of time getting rejected and just saying, well, I'll get a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. Or try it a little bit different or
yeah.
There's some of that too. Maybe you need to change instruments. Right.
Right.
Hey, you know what? I mean, that's a thing too, right? There are some musicians that will start on one instrument and end up being very, very good at another, right?
Absolutely true. And the same thing, like, to go back to the film thing, is you have some writers that move with facility between media where it's like, oh, I'm writing this TV series I created, but I'm also doing a feature. And then we're doing an interactive game based on, like that sort of thing. And you have others who are like, they stray out from the medium that launched them and they never really find their footing in the next one. And to understand like how those things work, like you're right, I guess in the musical terms, which you know better than I, there is hey, let me try that instrument, see if that's more organic to, how I create. And maybe you do find your thing, but I think it's really about like, do you keep at it because you love it and it's something you can't live without? Or is it something you're like, oh, maybe I'll do this. It works, I'll give it 3 weeks. And if I'm not Mark Zuckerberg, then clearly I'm going to do something else. Okay, dude, you're not cut out for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's such a like paradox, right? Because I mean, well, even in music, so there's a lot of people that play music for free, like a lot of people that do it for free.
Hey, I live in Austin. I know.
Yeah. I mean, but then there's a lot of people that make a lot of money with music, and there's a lot of people that are kind of in the middle that they just, do it as a hobby, but still make a little bit of money.
Yep.
But the thing about it is that I think we get discouraged, maybe through programming, I don't know, from doing something that is fun for money. And isn't that interesting? Because what you just said about the tenacity, those people are doing it because they have this big burning why of why they want to be what they're doing. And they're doing it because they love it. And chances are they're not making a whole bunch of money, right? But they keep at it and keep at it and keep at it and eventually get there. So I'm wondering, like, do you think that actually, let's ask you, how are you going to speak to your child about this? About following the passion, even though that passion might be music or something that might not make the money in the end.
You know what? It's a good question because I credit my mom with wanting me to have options. We grew up relatively poor, and my parents both grew up like poor on a level that because they worked really hard, I'll never understand. I'll never have a real touchstone for how poor they were, right? But I know that was one of the things my mom, when I was little, is my mom was like, with the money we have, I want to make sure that you get some exposure to a lot of things. And I mean, crazy stuff. It was just like, you know what? Why don't you try ice skating? I'm going to find a way to get you to a rink. Why don't you try swimming? Why don't you try soccer? Why don't you try bowling? Why don't you try golf? And what it was just like, see which one of these sticks with you, And I learned to play piano. My brother is a classical pianist now because that was one of the things, was like, play piano. He's a dual doctorate from Yale, musicology, music theory. He's a professor at UVA, like Harvard undergraduate. He took to the piano, whereas I at a certain point was like, tap out. I want to go into entertainment, right? And I think about that because I realized the sacrifices my mom made so that we would have that optionality, right?
Oh, wow.
Like you said, to sort of get there. And I think the reason I work so hard is because even as a young child, I recognized that my mom and my dad made sacrifices so that I could figure out what it is I wanted to do as opposed to what I had to do. I
Yeah.
live a life of privilege. Like, I'm not worried what I'm going to have for lunch or if there will be lunch or if I have a place to sleep today. That's privilege. And it's not lost on me. Like, that was not super clear always from my parents. And I hope that with my child, answer your question, I
Mm.
can, without making them fear where they're going to sleep tonight. You're in the street tonight, Billy.
Yeah.
That they can see like the options they get to figure out where their song is.
Yeah.
It is a privilege to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think that's really deep. I mean, because the I think that some parents will sort of like, I want my kid to be a doctor. I want my kid to be a lawyer.
Oh yeah.
They'll give them that one option that this is what you need to do, right? Because I need you to get out of the slums and all that other kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what you're saying is put them in everything. Give them options. Let them, because like what you just said, I mean, I know that when I was growing up, it was like a statistics thing. They'd be like, well, the chances of you having success in that is like less than 1%.
Yes. Right.
But that doesn't mean I'm not going to have success in it. Seriously, like, because what you just said earlier is that factor that made a big difference in the people's success was their tenacity. So
Yeah.
it's not a statistics thing where, right? It's work at it hard and, like you say, a little bit of luck. Be prepared for when those opportunities come, right?
Totally agree. And something you brought up, because I have a number of friends who are on their first child, sort of thing, like that stage in life. And it is absolutely true. There's oh my God, my kid wants to be a philosophy major. What is he going to
Yeah.
do? What is she going to do? How are they going to make money? Are they going to be living at home when they're 30? Like that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
And yet, when you do look at people who have become like CEOs of corporations who are very successful, I'm not talking about like soccer players who are making millions of dollars. Like, I
Right.
don't know if that's the career path, but like people who have gotten to that point, it's not like they all were just like straight up, hey man, I studied economics, I went to HBS, and now I'm running, Bain or whatever, right? Is some of them do have that, oh, I studied this esoteric thing undergraduate that led me to develop my brain. And now, yes, I can move into different careers and have different conversations. I hope that if my child comes and says, basket weaving or whatever the joke is,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that I can balance that thing of going, well, statistically speaking, you're going to be living at home at 30. Or maybe there's a way in which you pursue that in your teen years and you end up becoming the CEO of the new Etsy or something, like who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see. And then, when the rubber meets the road, who knows how I will act, but I'm going to try my best to act well.
Yeah, when you're in the thick of it, my child is just graduating from high school. Uh, and so
Congratulations.
and yeah, and so it's different when you're going through it, I will say. Like in theory, everything sounds like So I'm
Yes.
going to deal with this when it happens.
Exactly what happens. Just like that, was it the Mike Tyson line about like everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face?
That's exactly it. Yeah, punches in the face that will happen. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that just being a little bit mindful and making sure that you're open to researching, I think, a little bit as well, and not just that kind of rigid, this is how I was raised, so this is how I'm going to raise my kid kind of thing, right? I think
Yeah.
all that kind of helps as well. And we do live in the information age. That's the lucky thing, is that we do have the access to information to help us with this, right?
Yes.
Um,
And imagine like our children and their next generation, like they will look back the same way we look back, like before computers, before, electric cars, or all this stuff. And they'll be like, oh man, remember life when like LLMs were new and no one really knew what hallucinations were going to come up like that. Oh, those crazy days my parents lived, right?
yeah, yeah.
It'd be fun.
Yeah, it's yeah. Well, I was talking to the last guest on the last show, and we were talking about growing up in like the 80s and 90s, where it
Mhm.
was like the school of hard knocks. Like you were like just ramping your bike off crazy things and
Yeah,
slamming down on your head. Like you learned real quick about about life, right?
you
And
did. And happily, some of those lessons, not on the internet forever.
no, I
I
know.
worry about that with my kid. I'm like, oh, dude.
That is, I don't like. That's the thing. Most of the mistakes that I made growing up are gone. They're only a memory now.
Right.
And however I color them in my head, some of them are probably worse than they were. Some of them are probably a lot better than they were. But they're
Yeah.
gone and they've made an impact. But yeah, like you say, I mean, all these things that are recorded now, like, oh my goodness, no wonder kids are afraid to jump out of the bubble wrap, right?
It's so true. I know. So
And
yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'm with you on that one. I haven't figured what to say about that yet, other than watch out, everything's being recorded.
yeah, I think maybe it'll be. Oh no, that's an AI. That's an AI
Oh,
video. That's not
that's
me.
true. That's true. Do you remember there was actually a Michael Crichton book that was fantastic? It was made into not a great movie. As I apologize, very few books translate well or are well translated into film. It was the one with it was made with Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes. It was essentially the era when Japan was coming to this country in a very strong economic way, and people were very afraid of Japan, the way they're afraid of China right now.
Hmm.
And the central idea of it, like the plot, the technical plot of it was Japanese buy some new skyscraper in downtown LA, which is actually the Fox Plaza skyscraper now.
Okay.
And uh, there's a party there. Or it's one of the skyscrapers downtown. And there's a party there, and a girl gets killed, and there are security cameras all over the building, but they try to get the footage of them, and the cameras have been altered. The footage has been already doctored by the time they get it, right?
Oh
And
no.
it became a very procedural sort of thriller thing. It was not a great movie, but I'm telling you, I read the book before I saw the movie, and what I thought was fascinating about it was this: the point of it was not who done it, which is what the movie was about, right? I think Phil Kaufman made the movie. The point of it was they can't prove with visual evidence what happened. And Michael Crichton was like, remember the Memorex guy where it's like, is it live or is it Memorex? And like, he's sitting in front of the speakers, and that whole campaign was saying like, we can now trick your ears. You can't tell if it's live or it's Memorex. We've become that good with the fidelity of sound, right? And Crichton basically wrote that to say, the last sense that we have to judge where something is true, seeing is believing, right?
Yeah,
Show me
yeah.
proof. He's like, we just became good enough to fool our last sense. That may sound obvious on its face, or it's like, true, Photoshop with Gen AI now, you can create anything. But on an even deeper level, he was like, we all grew up with a sense that there was an objective reality. This is what happened. It's recorded. I believe it. He's like, how does it affect a generation that grows up in a world where you could show them anything and they're like, don't know, maybe, maybe not?
Mm-hmm.
How does it change you as a generation? And I thought that
Mm-hmm.
was an incredibly profound and subtle point in the book that was lost in the movie.
Wow, that's deep. That's very deep. And that's probably why there's so much divide in the world today. It's just because of that. We
Yeah.
can't, there is no such thing as a fact. There actually is no such thing as a fact anymore.
Right?
If you can create your own.
You're not really Tim. Who are you?
I'm not really, I'm a robot. Well, and that's
You-
coming, right? There's going to be avatars, in the virtual
yeah.
reality world that are going to be looking just like me. I'll be able to have a bot that'll act just like me, and I think that's already starting to come out now.
Yeah. You have like 10 episodes a day while you're in bed.
Yep, yep, yep. And I mean, I don't think we're there now. Maybe we are. Maybe we are there right now. And the tools that I'm privy to haven't gotten that far yet, but maybe the ones that are at the top are, right? Who
It's
knows?
true. And when we think about like, nominally about working at home, right? How do we work
Hmm.
at Home Rockstar? And you think about how are the professions changing? Because like with LLMs, people often just conflate AI in general with, oh, it's an LLM, right? But even if you just narrow it to these large language models, you say, wow, they've been trained on everything they could get their hands on. So if you want to code, they've read all the code in the world. If you want to write a book, they've
Absolutely.
read all the books in the world, that sort of thing. And they have a good ability to say, probably what you want to hear, write, see looks like this, right? So the whole conversation now about like the professions that are creating, are those going to exist? How are they going to change? And some people I think are very bold to say like, well, oh my God, like creative, like art design and print design and stuff like that. You'll just have people in natural language saying like, I need a really baller poster that shows the sun. And suddenly there's a
Yep.
whole generation of,
Yep.
designers that are out of business. And other people are like, well, it'll always be about the prompt engineering. You'll still need someone who has the aesthetic skills to be able to look at the output and, give it notes and make it better. Right. So you do this whole thing. And I'm very close to this because the three biggest cohorts of members in the Sukha, you're going to laugh because they're all work at home: engineers, designers, and writers.
No way. Wow.
Because they are squarely people who are like, I am here at home. I could do my knowledge work in 6 or 8 hours. I could do it in 3 or 4. How do I want to focus and get that done that way? And I've been thinking a lot with the new version of my platform. How do we accommodate that to say, hey man, I want to make sure that you stay in the game, that it's not just about you feel good at the end of the day, you're productive, but we gave you the tools, the modern tools to be productive in that way. Because that is an active conversation. Like members I talk to, genuinely scared about like, what is the new world,
Yep. I hear you. However, I do think that these tools are going to level a lot of playing fields. We're not going
Yeah.
to need these giant monopoly companies as much because now anybody work from home can download a few tools and have a
Yep.
whole team working for them, right? The
Completely agree.
productivity that you can have is huge, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it is time for you to get solo, so I actually want to hear a little
Ooh.
bit more about what you're excited about in your business.
I'll tell you the thing I'm excited about is when I started working from home, I started leading teams who are working remotely or hybrid, but some sense of like work anywhere. The challenges that came up because I had worked a lot in an office before that, at the studio, and then work on productions. You sort of work remote and hybrid and on set and remote. It's kind of all the whole thing. The thing that really stood out to me is like there were a couple of problems that were like painful. There was, and this sounds maybe vulnerable to say, but I've also heard from a number of members, there was the where do I start problem. And sometimes that first moment in the morning of like sitting here alone, looking at my to-do list and just feeling overwhelmed and finding myself procrastinating, like, oh, I could probably I didn't do the dishes from last night. I should do this real quick, or I didn't load the laundry. I did, and just finding some little thing to do because I had a hard time starting. The amount of thought we've put into how when you open Sukha in the morning, your assistant sort of like helps you and like guides you and like finds how you work. Like that was something that really excited me, of just like easing that moment, that overwhelmed feeling in the morning where it's like you sort of get going and suddenly you're like, oh my God, I'm half done. This is great. It's not even lunch, that was great. And another thing I touched on, which is like how you work. That was one of the big things for me with this new version is I have been lucky to have read a lot of, the great texts on productivity and, behavioral psychologists like that. And it's true. I got to meet Cal Newport. I've, obviously read Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow before, he died and stuff like that. And there are a lot of guys and girls who have written incredibly smart things. They do boil down to a couple of principles, right? So when you have one of those and you say, well, how does that apply to me? I don't think it's that binary black and white thing. And this is something else that really excites me is in doing this, I realized, for example, something like creativity, right? There is a principle in productivity about monotask, right? Like clear all your distractions out and monotask. Yeah. Totally good for some activities. But I'll tell you, when I was just coming up, I was probably like 20 years old. I was working in an ad agency that did trailers for movies. And it was run by these two guys, one of whom came to me, was president of the agency, and was like, he goes, call me Stevie. He's like, hey, Stevie, Bart. I was like, Bart, yeah, the guy in the vault, like who delivers tapes and film around Hollywood. Yeah. He goes, yeah, I think you should give him a trailer to write. And I was like, the guy in the vault that drives around? Yeah. Okay. And he's like, yeah. It's like, hey, you're the boss. Like, totally got it. I'll give him something. So I found like a Warner's B title that had like a month before the due date, right? It was not like, Batman or something huge. It was like, hey, gave Bart a couple examples of similar kinds of trailers. Here's another movie we did last year. It's kind of like this. Here's sort of what the trailer should be like. Go nuts, right? So I give it to him. Jeff comes to my office like 2 days later. He's like, how's Bart doing? I'm like, I don't know, dude. I sort of didn't want to pressure him. This is his first time. I just send him home with the, cut of the movie and let him move. So he goes like, okay, fine. What else did you give him? I'm like, he's never written a trailer before. I gave him one thing. I'm not going to like blow his mind. We give him two things. He goes, Stevie. It's always about the other thing. I was like, what? He's like, you have to understand with creativity, the thing that you're focused on, the front of your mind is thinking you're doing, is worthless. It is only there to distract you. So the part of your mind that does the really cool stuff is free and is not being watched. And that's when you have that moment of like, chocolate and peanut butter. Oh, okay. And he's like, if you don't give him something else to work on, he's going to sit there at night stressed out that the president of the agency wanted him to write a trailer and never have a great idea. He's like, you need to respect the process. It's not about monotasking. It is in this case about like context switching and giving him that thing of ping back and forth. Cut to years later where I've worked with so many writers and so many, he was absolutely right. What a great lesson to be taught when you're like 20 years old about creativity, which, when you read a lot of the books, they frown upon that. But you need to know what is I need to accomplish and how do I accomplish it? So I've tried in Sukha to balance that, to be like, hey, man, these are kind of the core principles and we'll help you with them. But if we see that you need to adapt them, we'll do that and we'll remember and we'll always suggest that for you. Your smart assistant will do that. So those are the things I'm really excited about. Sorry, that was a long answer, but I love it. I'm trying to help a lot of people at 3:00 play with their kids or go, down to the river or whatever it is, rather than 6:00 be like, where the fuck did the day go?
Yeah. So where do we get this app then? How do we find out more?
Oh, simple. It's a web app. Just go to the Sukha, TheSukha.co, the Sukha Company. So thesukha.co.
Wow. Definitely gonna check that
out. It's like free for a bit. No funny business. No, if you forget to cancel, we'll bill you.
Okay.
I just want to build this so the people who need it, which are largely work from home, engineers, designers, writers, they find it. If they dig it, boom. And what's interesting is if you start paying us, there's a 96% chance you'll renew month over month. Because once you have that experience, like getting into a flow state, being like, oh my God, you're hooked. You're like, why would I work? And why would I waste my day when I could get my stuff done faster? So that's what excites me. And that's where you can find it. Thank you for asking.
Brilliant. That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steven, for rocking out with me today. This has been super enlightening.
Super fun. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes. And to the listeners, make sure you go to workathomerockstar.com for more information.